Lori here. I'm here today to do kind of a different thing. I don't do reading tags so much on my channel, but because my reading habits have changed so much in the last year and a half since I started working full time, and especially recently because we've really been living we haven't been going out and doing much. I just want to talk through my reading habits both now, then, and what's going on in my life now. And I thought that you guys would get a kick out of this tag because I think my reading habits are a little bit unique and different, but you guys will have to be the judge once we get to it. But let's get into it. I'm going to be reading from my computer, so if you guys see me looking up and down, that's probably why. But the first question in this reading tab, which everything will be linked on my blog, is do you have a certain place at home for reading? For me, I do. When I'm physically in my house, I normally like to sit on my bed and read, or I like to sit on my chair, which is right here. You can see that. But I normally do try to sit there, but when it's a beautiful and gorgeous day, I normally will find a spot outside in my backyard or in the front of my house. I love to sit in the sun and read. That's one of my favorite things, especially in the summer. I love to get tan and such. But now that all the local parks are closed, I go for a bike ride and then I read there for 30 minutes. I can't do that now because all the parks are closed, but I normally do. It's just very, very important to me that I have something to lean my back up against so that my back doesn't hurt. But when I commute, which I commute a lot normally, I'm always reading when I'm commuting, on a train or something, or on a subway. So those are my preferred spots to read, or in my house somewhere comfortable where I can kind of control the noise. But most of the time in my house, it's in my bed. Outside, it's in when my back's up against something, or my favorite is in a park somewhere, when it's a beautiful day. But those are the places that I normally read. But yeah, so those are the spots I normally read or prefer to read. The next question is, do you use a bookmark or a piece of paper or anything? Most of the time, I do try to have a bookmark, and the bookmarks that I love I'm going to show you guys, are these. And they're the simplest bookmarks. I go to a lot of book conventions. You're going to hear about my book conventions a lot. But I normally, every book publisher has just random bookmarks on their tables. I normally come out of conventions with 50 of them. And I have a cup up there that I normally use. And because I commute so much, they just get lost. I have so many gorgeous bookmarks from so many different publishing places, or book boxes and stuff like that, and they're so pretty, and I'm just so afraid that they're gonna get lost when I'm commuting, or sometimes they're super heavy and then I'm afraid that I'm gonna lose them. So I normally stick with this, but I have used receipts as bookmarks. I have used pieces of paper, but I'm someone that needs to have a bookmark. I just need to, not only because I won't know where I am in my book, but also when I read like this. So I read like this, and so that's how I read, because I get very distracted. I need to know exactly where I am, and I also don't like to jump ahead. So I'm the type of person that I will read the first line, and then I'll read the last line, and then I'll spoil myself accidentally. So it's really important that I read kind of like that. That's just how I read. So I always have to have a bookmark. I try to use the paper ones, but then I brutalize them. This will last maybe 4 months, maybe not even that. This one's a little bit more well made, but I do brutalize the paper bookmarks. So I use them until literally they are decrepit and done, and then I have to get another one. But I have a lot of them because of the conventions I go to. So that is normally my bookmark life. I try to use the fancy ones, but I'm always afraid of losing them. So normally I resort to this, or I always have to have something as a bookmark. That's my one rule. The next question is, when do you like to stop to read? Now, normally, I like to stop reading at a page break, or at the end of a chapter, just because I think it's nice and complete. But sometimes I really don't have a choice if I'm on the run, or if I'm commuting, or if I'm on a train, then I have to get up at my stop. If that does happen, I do try to at least get to the end of a chapter, and I'm continuing reading as I'm walking, which is probably not super safe, but I do really want to get to an indent so that when I come back, it's easier to fall back into a story. And also audiobooks. When I do listen to audiobooks, I just keep listening. But when I'm physically reading stuff, I try to have a set point of stopping. And what I've been doing now, since I'm home a lot more, is I'll just pick a number of pages, and I'll read 2 pages for every mini chapter break, and then I'll like go back to watching my TV show. But I do try to have like a set endpoint that is like where the story is kind of at a standstill, so that when I jump back into the story like a couple of hours later, I won't be totally confused. So that's normally what I try to do. Doesn't always happen, but that's what I normally try to do. Question is, what do you like to read and drink when you read? And normally I just like to drink water. I'm kind of like easy. Sometimes if I'm reading really late, I like to have some type of caffeine. I don't read very late very often, but if I'm reading something that is like a thriller or something, or like something that I'm like action packed, I'd like to have popcorn or something just to keep eating. And if I'm reading something that has a lot of sweets, I tend to eat a lot of sweets. But mostly I try to drink water and try to stay a little bit healthy. But if I'm like really tired or like really in the middle of a book and I just can't keep my eyes open, I will partake in some caffeine. But those are a couple of my general eating and drinking habits. But I don't have like every single time I every single time I read, I have to drink this. I just kind of mostly just eat what I'm in the mood for. But those are like some of the things I like to eat. So. The next question is, do you multitask when you read, and what do you do? This is a big one for me because when I'm commuting, I always have a lot of background noise because I'm always like on a train or like a subway. So I'm kind of used to reading with a lot of like distractions. So when I'm home, what I do normally is I watch a lot of like daily vloggers, like family vloggers, just because that's something that I like, and I watch a lot of like homeschool content because I'm a teacher and I just like hearing how people are teaching their own kids. So that's kind of where I get a lot of my background noise. I also love true crime videos. Like that's like a big thing I really, really like. So I always put them on in the background and then I kind of read. And I always do booktube as a background noises as well. So I always have something on as background noise. And then like the only time I don't is if it's like if I'm just starting a book and I want to like really focus on it, or if I'm at the tail end of a book and I want to like quickly finish it. But most times I always have something on in the background. And then what I've been doing recently, because I've been home a lot, is I've been watching a lot of shows on Netflix and on like Netflix and like Hulu even, and they don't really have long commercial breaks. So what I've been doing is I've been creating my own commercial breaks, and like I'll watch a show, I'll get to when the commercial break is, and you can normally tell. And then I'll read like a couple of pages in my book as like a commercial break, and then I'll go back. And I find that that's like really effective because I still am spending so much time watching stuff, but I don't want to let my reading game fall at the wayside. So I always normally have some type of background noise when I'm reading, but it's stuff that I can control. I've also like had like shows that I've seen like 1,000 times or true crime videos that I've seen a lot of times. But that's normally what I do. I just can't like listen to an audiobook when I'm reading. That won't work. But that's some of the things. So I always do have background noise on, but it's always something that I can just like glaze up at or watch kind of like half-heartedly. But yeah, that's what I do when for background noise. When I can control it. There's sometimes I can't, like if I'm commuting or something like that, that I can't control it. But if I can, I do like to have some type of YouTube or something in the background. Question has changed dramatically. The question is, do you read one book at a time or more than one book? And if you would have asked me like a lot of years ago, I would have said I read one book at a time and that is it. And I did not listen to audiobooks. Now that has changed. I normally read one book at a time, and less if I'm doing like a read, like a buddy read with a friend, or for some other reason that I need to read two books, but I normally read one book at a time, and then I always have at least one audiobook going. Sometimes I have up to 3 audiobooks going if I'm doing one for like a reading challenge with a friend or something, or like right now I always have 2 audiobooks going. I have one that I listen to when I'm working out so I can really focus on it, or like bike riding, and then I have one that I use as background noise when I'm working because it's this book that I've read before, or like as a contemporary, something that I can easily follow as I'm inputting grades and stuff. So I normally right now I have 1 physical read and 2 audiobooks. So that's really helped me increase my reading goals because I have learned how to listen to audiobooks. Definitely I would say if you're struggling listening to audiobooks, I would say pick books you've already read first, like like if you've read like whatever book you've read a lot, just listen to it and kind of train your mind because it is a skill, I think, and that's how I've kind of taught myself. I've always started with books that I've already read, and then I've kind of moved on to books that quickly capture my attention. But yeah, so normally I have at least 1 to 2 to 3 books at a time, but they're just in like different formats. The next question is, do you read ahead or skip pages? And I don't ever skip pages. Like I don't ever read like the end of the book. I know I have some friends that read the end of the book first, which blows my mind. I'm like, why do you do that? You're basically spoiling yourself. But what I sometimes do is if it's like a sexy book or stuff that has like a lot of romantic scenes, I sometimes just get bored and I'll just like skim that because it's kind of pretty much self-explanatory. But or if it's like really descriptive language sometimes, and I'm just like, okay, we get it. It's a really really pretty tree. Sometimes skim that. But I do try to read every word. It's just like depends on what it is. If it's like a sexy scene or something like that, or like something else, like I might just like skim it because I kind of can like understand like what they're talking about. But it's very, very rare do I skim stuff like that. Like I would say that's literally the only situation I remember is like if it's like a sexy scene and I'm like, okay. And it's mostly like adult romances. I'm like, okay, I get it. And then I just kind of like, all right, well then move on to the next point. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. But I never like read the end of a book first. That would be blasphemy in my head. If you do that, that's totally cool. But I find that to be like spoilery and I don't like that. Break the spine or not. And I used to break the spine on my reads all the time. I won't do it because I'm going to break the spine of this one, but I used to literally just read with it like back turned because like that was just, I read a lot of mass market paperbacks when I was younger because there really was no YA books. So those books I would just like turn over and I would definitely crack the spine. I've tried to be better, especially because I do kind of do giveaways sometimes, or I give these books to kids, or like I keep them for my own collection. So I try not to do that. But I will admit, since I do get a lot of arcs, sometimes it's hard with the arcs to keep the spine from not breaking. Um, and so it really depends. It doesn't matter to me if I break a spine because then it shows that I just really care about a book and I read it a lot. But I know some people have really big issues about that, so I try not to. But it's not like I won't be devastated. I won't have to go out and buy a new copy if my spine breaks. And also, I get a lot of arcs, so like at the end of the day, I don't keep all the arcs that I wind up reading, so it's not a big problem, but I do try to avoid it if I can. The next question is, do you write in your books? And I don't write in my books. I used to write a lot in my books when I was like in school and college, and I would write notes and I would highlight. The one thing I do that I don't do in my physical reads, but when I do like read on my Kindle, which is so rare, I do highlight points. And I don't know why I do it. I think because it's just like a reminder of my college days. So I'll highlight like favorite quotes, or I'll highlight like important lines, I think. And then I never do anything with the highlights, but it's just something to keep me more engaged. I don't do that in like a real book. Um, but that's what I do when I read on my Kindle, but I don't write in my books normally. But on a Kindle, I do highlight, and I don't do anything with the highlights. But it's just something to keep me kind of engaged, and also because I don't really have a bookmark in an ebook. I guess I kind of do, but it just kind of keeps me more engaged, like a bookmark would, I guess. So that's my thoughts on the whole like writing and highlighting in books. You read everywhere and anywhere, and I do. I can read in any location. My parents and my friends just always laugh at me. I can read in the middle of a crowded convention hall. I can read online. I can read by myself. I can read in a subway. I can read in a car. I can read in a train. I can read on a plane. I can read anywhere. I don't get motion sickness like at all, which some people do, but I can literally read anywhere. And also the beauty of an audiobook is I can take my audiobook anywhere. I've also since I started commuting this past year especially, I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks or stuff in my ears because it's just a little bit easier, especially on a subway because we're literally like on top of each other. But when I do commute back and forth, I do actually use audiobooks a little bit more. But I do read anywhere and everywhere. There's not a spot that I cannot read. I even used to like sneak reading at my retail job or like at the gym because I would just have kids that I was watching, which probably wasn't the best thing to do. But now at my job, like with the kids that I teach, I really, really can't read. I can kind of sneak reading now, and I'm kind of working from home, but I can read anywhere, and I mean that anywhere. Question is, do you read silently in your head or out loud? And I actually do both. I normally read inside my head, especially when I'm commuting or when I'm doing stuff like that. But if there is a part of my book that is really confusing, I will read it out loud because then I feel like I'm like understanding like what's happening. If I'm really confused or if it's like a tricky part that I'm just not understanding, I will read it again and again and again, and I'll eventually just read it out loud. But I normally read it in my head. Or sometimes if like I make my background noise too loud, or there's like a really, really loud part, or like an action battle or something, and I am trying to read, I will read. I can also like lower down my volume, but if I don't feel like doing that, I'll also read out loud to go over it. but most of the time I read in my head. There's very, very few instances that I do read aloud, but sometimes I do.
That'd be awesome.
The next question is, where do you find yourself reading? And I find myself reading like any time of the day. There's no specific time. If you would have asked me when I was commuting back and forth to my job, I'd definitely say I would read mostly in the morning and during commute, and then when I come home from work. But now it's pretty much the same. Like, I'll read before work. Actually, right now I won't even read before work because I really don't go anywhere, but I do read like after work. And I do actually have a lot of listening time during my job now because we are working from home, and I'm not Zooming to do classes. So really anytime. Like, I would say mostly it's in the evening, but really anytime. Anytime I could find time to read, I just do. It's just like a natural part of my day. There are so few days out of the year that I don't read. It's just a natural part of my existence. So, and that's what it is to be a reader. So I'm not upset about that. My family might be upset about that because I read a lot, but I really like it. What is your best setting to read in? My perfect setting to read in when I can is outside in the beautiful sunshine with not too much wind, not too much hotness. Actually, I don't even mind when it's hot. I actually love it when it's hot. But that's what I love. I love to read outside with the sun on my face, reading, relaxing, and enjoying it. I also love to read in like a park and in nature. I love to people watch when I read. I love to also go into the city when I'm able and like just sit in like Union Square Park and read. I love to read outside. It's like one of my favorite things. That's why I love the summer so much. I can spend so many hours outside. I hope it doesn't curtail this year at all, because all the parks are closed. I hope that they open up soon once it's safe and such. But right now, that's like my perfect spot to read. I mean, I do like my house as well, but I really do love to read outside over anything else. Question is, what type of books do you read the most? And I do listen to a lot of audiobooks. I do also read a lot of paperback books just because a lot of the books I have are arcs from various conventions. And I think the fewest amount of books I have are actually hardback books, but I read anything. There's not like a book I won't read. The only books I probably won't read are ones that are signed by authors that are like hard to find. Like my Cassie Clare books, I rarely read because they're just so big. But I still do keep them because she signed them, or like my Lee Bardugo books. Any authors that I really have a hard time getting to sign stuff, I probably don't read them, or I read the book already and then I just got it signed. But those are the books I would like have a hard time rereading just because I don't want them to get ruined. But the most often stuff I read is paperback or arcs, and the least amount I actually use is probably my Kindle, which I'm trying to get better at, really trying to get better at, but that's probably the least format of books that I read is my Kindle. The next question is, do you have any unique habits when you read? And I would say my unique habit is that I must have a bookmark when I read, and if I'm reading in my house, I must have some type of background noise on. I think I talked about those a little bit, but those are unique things for me. Like, I have to read with a bookmark, and I have to read it with background noise if I'm in my house. So, yep. Another thing I do that's kind of unique is if I'm walking somewhere and I kind of know the way and I know I won't get hit by a car, I do read when I walk, which is probably dangerous, but I do it a lot. I'm going to be a little bit controversial. All the book lovers in the world will be like, what? Do you care if your book series match? For me, I don't. Most of the time, I don't. It only matters to me if I love the series and I'm gonna like keep it for the rest of my life, then it bothers me. But if I am just like reading stuff and they're on my bookshelves, it doesn't matter to me. And I think it's because I do go to so many conventions and I get so many different formats of books. I get arcs, I get paperbacks, and it doesn't really matter to me unless if I'm putting them in the place of like extreme pride for me, which is like 5 of my book series. But the rest of them, I really don't care. As long as I can read it. Like, people have I know some people, like, their books have to be in pristine condition. Mine don't. I go to so many book conventions normally. Even when I get them home from my convention, they have nicks and they have stuff on them just because they've been in bag for like a weekend. So that doesn't really bother me. They don't really have to match. They don't have to be in great condition. As long as I could physically read the book and there's no like damage to like, I am the most easy person to read, like, and then I get rid of my books that I don't want anymore, and I give them to, like, schools or stuff or charities, but I really don't care unless, like, I know for a fact, oh, this is my favorite series of all time. They need to be in perfect condition. The only book series that I'm a little bit annoyed at is Lee Bardugo, because my books don't match. Like, I have all 3 of her books, and the last one doesn't match, and I cannot for the life of me get a book to match it anymore. That's like the only book series that I'm like a little bit mad at because I really do like that book series. But other than that, not really. Last question in this book tag, and this is like a YouTube exclusive because I don't think I put it on my blog, is do you write? I used to write a lot. I used to write like stories, and I had like 5 books I was writing, and now I really don't. I just don't have the time, and I don't think I'm a very good writer, but I do have story ideas. Maybe one day, maybe I'll like write it somewhere, but I would love one day to like publish a book. I just don't think it's ever going to happen. But I do have ideas. I think that authors have much better ideas than I do. But I do have some ideas that I would love one day to turn into something. We will see. But let me know what are some of the answers to these questions in the comments. And I will talk to you guys later for another video. Let me know if you guys like me doing tags. Let me know in the comments what are some tags you would like to see me do. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye. Be safe and be well.